Hello guys, it's me Simo Orahara, and in this video I want to talk about Sajin's new Bankai that we saw in the last arc, as well as the technique Jinka no Jutsu. Of course, my talk will not be about the Bankai itself as much as I will open the door to discussing a larger topic, because frankly the story of Sajin Komamura and the Bankai he launched in the last arc gave us an idea of how big the world of Bleach is and the stories that it can tell, especially the background of Sajin Komamura and the secret of the technique of transformation into humans, because Kobo did not explain this issue in a way that make us understand Sajin's background without complication and also without being debates between fans. But I will try to present the most important pieces of information on this subject as well as the one I feel comfortable with regarding the origin of Sajin's clan. First of all, the first thing I want to start with is this scene, the scene of the end of the battle between Sajin and Tosen. Sajin's words in these scenes give us a comprehensive picture of what happened to him in the final arc. Sajin tells Tosen not to seek revenge so that your personality will not change, and he added that if he lost him, it would have left a hole in his heart. And so, Sajin's words in the Arankara arc have a very deep meaning and explain several things about his background and how he too went through the same path that he warned Tosen about. So, to start talk about Sajin, we have to talk about his appearance. Sajin's appearance in the story was from the beginning in disguise, behind the mask and shield that covered his body, until he first showed his true form when he was fighting Zaraki, and he appeared as a monster or a wolf capable of standing on two legs and with a human mind. Personally, in the light of those fiery events for Ichigo, will he save Rukia or not, and the plot twist of Aizen Sasuke, I did not think to ask fundamental questions about Sajin, especially since he's not an ordinary person, because Kobo only focused on the souls coming from the real world related to humans. And so, Sajin Komamura, how was his case? Was he like a wolf in the real world and died and moved to Soul Society or something else? Anyway, all of these things, I think many, including me, did not give it much attention, because Sajin himself was never such a character that attracts people, as well as the events of the story at that time were dealing with topics far from Sajin neither his background. But considering the personality of Sajin, the latter was always linked to two characters. The old man Yamamoto, as he was the one who saved him and accepted him within the 13 Gucci, and the second person is Tosen, who had a good relationship with him, especially since the first is a monster and the second is a blind man. Thus communication was possible without any fears that they would not accept each other. And Kobo in Sajin's topic was always focused on Tosen-Sajin relationship and how the latter was always trying to convince Tosen that trying to avenge his friend's death was not the right way and that revenge would change him in a bad way. Anyway, back to Sajin's topic, the latter was urging Tosen not to seek revenge, based on the ideas he believed in, but without personally trying them. All Sajin was trying to do was convince Tosen without actually going through those experiences, in the sense of talking about stopping to seek revenge, while Sajin never really lost someone dear to his heart. But when the old man was killed, the person he was most attached to, finally Sajin's vengeful instinct was awakened. And I'm not talking about any instinct, rather his clan's instinct. And here we get to the events in which we will know about Sajin's real background and who he is. So, after Yamamoto was killed, Sajin could only think of how to avenge the death of the person who had saved his life. Originally, the idea of Sajin becoming a Shinigami in the first place was because of the old man Yamamoto, so the gratitude and the respect Sajin had for Yamamoto soon made him forget all those principles he was urging Tosen to cling to, and replaced them with revenge. And he had no solution but to gain a new power to fight the killer of Yamamoto, and this is by returning to his hometown to the leader of his clan, where we discovered that Sajin belongs to a clan as he appeared in front of a huge wolf inside a cave. Here Sajin asked him to teach him one of their clan secrets, and here we reach the most important point in the subject, which created a great debate among fans. The old grandfather tells Sajin that their clan secret technique is Jinka no Jutsu, which means the technique of transformation into humans. And the old man explains in the first bubble that because of the sins they committed while they were alive, they were sent to the animal realm. And let us stand with this information because here the dispute occurred. The translation of manga panda and the translation of manga stream agree on the same term, which is that the ancestors of Komamura Sajin, due to the sins they committed in the past, were sent to the animal realm, while this translation said they were sent to the hell of beasts. And based on this translation, some fans went in another direction by saying that the ancestors of Sajin had been sent to hell and somehow returned to the Soul Society. And some believed that they escaped from hell, or that the punishment was not enough for them and then they were returned to the Soul Society. And frankly, I'm not comfortable with that theory, because there is another official translation that confirms what Manga Panda and Manga Stream said, which is the French translation. They also said the same thing. The grandfather said, "Nous hommes avons été bannis au royaume des animaux," and the royaume des animaux means animal realm. It is clear the ancestors of Komamura Sajin were present from the beginning in the Soul Society, meaning that the ancestors of Sajin overcame the questions of whether they would be taken to the Soul Society or hell, because this process, I believe, does not take place except with souls that have not yet been purified so that they may go to hell or heaven, according to what they have committed, of course. Like what happened with the murder of Shibata's mother. So I think, and because they were originally in the Soul Society, that they were in the form of werewolves who committed many crimes and sins. The only solution to punish them was by sending them back to the real world and being reborn in the form of talking animals, as if they were cursed by becoming animals. And according to Buddhist belief that fits the mention of the animal realm by Sajin's grandfather, souls can be resurrected in the form of animals within the animal realm. And you can read the definition of the animal realm here, which is one of the 6 words of Buddhism, where it was mentioned that it is a realm similar to the realm of hell, and therefore this corresponds to the mention of the official translation in English, since resending the ancestors of Sajin as animals after they had humans' bodies and superhuman strength is in itself a hell. But everyone agrees that we don't know how Sajin's ancestors returned to the Soul Society. Nobody knows how it was done. But since Yuhabach and his Quincy army were also living in the real world and built the hidden Vanarach kingdom within the Serity, it is possible that the ancestors of Komamura Sajin did the same thing and somehow found a way to go to the Soul Society and stay there, but only between caves and mountains, where they avoid contact with any other creatures. But it seems that Sajin was the person who could no longer bear to remain hidden for the rest of his life and decided to leave and abandon his clan. It seems that the life he hoped for outside his clan, outside the caves, was not what he expected. He is a monster in the eyes of others. Therefore, there is no doubt that, for example, he was stoned, chased, etc. So he remained hidden even after he left his clan, until he met Yamaji, who saved him and recognized him as a person worthy of life, and he decided to devote himself to serving the old man by becoming a Shinigami and repaying Yamaji's debt. And back to Sajin and his clan, they were undoubtedly still ashamed and pained by what happened to them and to their ancestors, and how they had become animals, creatures, which made them want to return to their former form. And after attempts and experiments, they found a way to make them return to their human form, but for a certain period of time. We don't know whether sacrificing hearts is the only way to activate this technique, or there are other methods. But according to Sajin's great-grandfather, he suggested that he sacrificed his heart to teach him the technique, and this is what Sajin Komamura did. He removed his heart with his hand and gave it to the old man as an offering to eat. And Sajin's return to his human form and his gaining tremendous power seems to me like Ichigo when he wanted to learn the final Getsuga Tensho. They both went through the same experience. First, they both wanted to learn a secret technique, and perhaps the final Getsuga Tensho technique is specific to the Shiba clan, and Ishin hinted about finding difficulties with ingest when he wanted to learn it. And Ichigo had to sacrifice his Shinigami power and becoming just a normal human, and Sajin also had to sacrifice his heart and eventually become an animal again. Also, the shape of Sajin after his great-grandfather taught him, the technique become different, which is the same thing that happened with Ichigo when he came to Aizen for the first time, becoming the Bankai form we know. Secondly, we noticed that Ichigo did the secret technique, which is the final Getsuga Tensho, where he changed his shape, and shortly after that he lost that transformation. So I see that the same thing happened to Sajin. He released his new version of the Bankai, and as Sajin described the Bankai, Kokujo Tengenmyo, his shield, forms Kokujo's life, and the life of Sajin is surely represented in his heart, and by removing his heart, automatically life was removed from the Bankai, which is represented by shield as we said, and the Bankai was shaped like that, a terrifying body filled with a thirst for revenge. And the thing that frankly amazed me is not that Sajin became immortal even temporarily, but the fantastic speed with which his Bankai became, despite his big form. In an instant, Sajin was below and Bambita was above. In the blink of eye, Bankai Jouei was behind her and giving her the final blow. But despite all of that, Sajin's idea in the end was wrong. If he were to obtain immortality for a longer period, he would at least try his luck to reach Yuhabach and possibly fight another generator. But the technique in the end, like the final Getsuga Tensho, stopped working after a few moments of activation. So the Bankai is nothing but a faded way for Sajin to vent his anger over the old man's death. And the funny thing is that both sides of the battle, Sajin and Bambita, met the same fate, and neither side could be considered the winner. They both lost the battle. One of them returned to an animal, and Bambita had the worst fate, which is her transformation into a zombie at the hands of Giselle. Revenge blinded Sajin as though he has returned to his true self, and in the end Sajin ended up as a wolf unable to speak. In Rokia's novel, they give us a little about the fate of Sajin after the war, and I will tell you the most important thing in the novel about him. The novel stated that there is a true member of the werewolf clan of Sajin, two small wolves named Shoma and Oryo, and they joined a squad 7 as a beginner Shinigami. Shoma and Oryo are in the same form as Sajin before he turned into a wolf, but they can understand Sajin since it seems that the member of that clan can understand animals' language, or at least the language of the wolves. The clan also consists of other members, but Kobo didn't focus on them. As the novel mentioned, for example, that some of members of Sajin clan have business dealings with Omaida family where they sell them jewels. Another information is that the former member of Squad 4, Yumura, has become the vice captain of Iba. So, as a conclusion to this topic, it seems that Sajin's chapter or topic is greater than we expected, whether it is about revenge for Yamaji's death or the revenge that is rooted in his clan and what happened to them in the past. I wish Kobo had explained more how the ancestors of Sajin were sent to the animal kingdom and how they returned to the Soul Society. But it seems, as usual, he preferred to avoid entering into these topics, because he knows that he will be required to talk about other things that he does not seem to have the desire to talk about. So guys, this is the end of my video. See you in another video.